so the next one that you see is x minus 3 over x plus 7 is less than or equal to 0. Okay, use your steps. Step 1 says make sure the inequality is in standard form, make sure it's factored, and the right-hand side is 0. Okay, this one's already like that. Excellent. Step 2 says find the zeros of the numerator and denominator. So we'll set the numerator equal to 0 and the denominator. This time we have a denominator. So to solve the first one, we move our 3 over. When I move the 3 over, it changes signs and becomes a positive 3. When I move this 7 over, it changes signs and becomes a negative 7. Those are my two zeros. Now, you have to decide at this point whether you're going to use brackets or parentheses. If it comes from the denominator, it will always use parentheses. If it comes from the numerator, it depends. You'll say, well, what does it depend upon? It depends upon the sign in the problem. Since this was the sign in the problem, less than equal to takes a bracket. So this particular number will take a bracket when we put it on the number line. So that brings us to step 3. We will put these on the number line. Make sure that you put them in numerical order. So a negative 7 would come to the left of 3 on the number line. After you do that, you want to write the name of each interval. So this interval starts at negative infinity and it goes to negative 7. Negative 7 came from the bottom, so it uses parentheses. This interval would go from negative 7 to 3. Negative 7 uses parentheses and 3 uses a bracket. This interval goes from 3 to infinity. That's step 3. Step 4 is to choose a test point from each interval. Be really careful with the negatives. Out here, I'm going to choose the number. Let's pick a different color. Out here, I'm going to choose the number negative 8. Don't choose negative 6. Negative 6 would actually lie in the middle. So make sure that you're very careful. Negative 6 would actually lie right here, so don't pick negative 6. Okay, over here in the middle, I could pick negative 6, but I would prefer to pick 0. For those of you that don't like 0, then pick 1 or 2. Those are in that interval as well. And a number out here I could pick 4. Well, you say, well, what do I do with those numbers, those orange numbers? Well, you plug them in, and you always plug them into the end of step 1. So I'm going to be plugging into x minus 3 over x plus 7, and I'm going to see if this inequality here is true. Okay, I'm going to start with the number negative 8. Negative 8 minus 3, negative 8 plus 7. Okay, that would give me a negative 11 over negative 1. Two negatives make a positive 11. Is 11 less than 0? No, 11 is more than 0. So that means this piece is false. Okay, so let's plug in 0. Remember, you're plugging it into the end of step 1. 0 minus 3, 0 plus 7. Okay, so that's a negative 3 over 7. Okay, that's a negative 3/7. Is a negative number less than 0? Yes, negative numbers are less than 0, so that means that this is a true statement. Okay, lastly, we'll plug in the number 4. 4 minus 3, 4 plus 7. That gives me 1 over 11. Now 1 over 11 is a really small number, but it is positive. So is a positive number less than 0? No, it is not. So this part is false. Now remember, the way that you choose your answer is you only pick the true intervals. So your answer for this one is only the true intervals, so you only have one this time. So it would be from -7 to 3 with a bracket. That's how that one would look. Okay, let's try one more of these. This one's a little tougher. Okay, when you get ready to do this one, you'll see that it's not in standard form. So that's what you have to do with it first, is put it in standard form. So when you put it in standard form, you have to move the 2 over. Okay, when you move the 2 over, make sure that you do not combine right now. Do not say x plus 1 minus 2. You can't do that because there's not a common denominator. So when you put these two fractions together, you have to have a common denominator. That means you have to put an x plus 3 right here. If you put 1 in the bottom, you have to put 1 in the top. You can't just move the 2 over by itself. So what you have now is an x plus 3 in the bottom. Now they have a common denominator. And you have x plus 1 minus 2x minus 6. Now let's talk about the minus 6 for a second. You took a -2 and distributed it here and here. -2x, -2 times 3 would be a -6. Okay, on the top, if you combine your like terms, 1x minus 2x is a -1x, and 1 minus 6 is a -5. Okay, that is the end of step 1. So when we get over to our number line, this is where we're going to plug our numbers in to see if they're true or false. Now, here starts step 2. Step 2 says you set your numerator equal to 0 and also your denominator equal to 0. So solving this one out, I'm going to move the 5 over. I'll divide both sides by -1, and x would equal a -5. When I move this 3 over, I get that x equals a -3. Now remember, if it comes from the denominator, it always uses parentheses. If it comes from the numerator, it depends upon the symbol in the problem. Well, the symbol in this problem was greater than or equal to. Since it was greater than or equal to, we will again use a bracket. Now, you don't always use a bracket. Every example I gave you used a bracket, but you won't always use a bracket. Okay, let's put these numbers on the number line, dividing the number line into intervals. Make sure you put them in numerical order. So your -5 would come first, and your -3 would come second. -5 takes a bracket. -3 takes parentheses. Next, we'll choose test points. So a number out here we could choose would be -6. A number in here we could choose would be -4. And a number out here we could choose would be 0. Or any positive number, 1, 2, 3, 8, any of those would be good. So we're going to plug these 3 numbers right here into the end of step 1, which says -x minus 5 over x plus 3. We're looking to see if that's greater than or equal to 0. Be careful with the negatives. Remember, you're plugging into the end of step 1. Okay, so I have a negative of x. Well, x is negative 6 over x plus 3. Okay, so two negatives make 6 minus 5, and negative 6 plus 3. Is negative 1/3 more than 0? No, negative numbers are less than 0, so this is false. Okay, so let's plug in negative 4. So you'll say the negative of x minus 5 over x plus 3. I'm looking to see, is that greater than or equal to 0? So I get a negative 1 over negative 1, which is a positive 1. Is positive 1 greater than 0? Yes. So that means that this part is true. You'll say, well, I've noticed they're always alternating. They don't always alternate. Most of the time they do, but they don't always alternate. Lastly, I'll plug in 0. So you get the negative of x, which is 0, minus 5, 0 plus 3. So on the top I get 0 minus 5, 0 plus 3. Is negative 5/3 greater than 0? It is not. That answer is false. Now, as soon as you get to this point and you get your number line drawn, you're going to pick your true statement. So my true statement would be negative 5 to negative 3, and that is my answer.